I have been thinking about what I could talk about here in the DM's Den next, when I looked at the sky and it was yellow. A storm had blown a huge cloud of dust from Sahara into Europe, and suddenly the blue skies of Portugal were no more. It looked like I was in the middle of an episode of The Walking Dead or NCIS Los Angeles. And that's when it hit me. Weather. Welcome to Arcadia and to the DM's Den, my series dedicated to sharing my advice, hard-earned lessons, and cool ideas for DMs all around. Today we talk about how to use weather to improve your game. One time, I described to my players the city of Greyhold as rain started to pour, flooding the streets with trickling streams of water, coating its dark cobblestones with a reflective veil, and encouraging every citizen to retreat to the safety and warmth of their homes. One of my players quickly reacted, "Oh damn, it's raining." That simple comment made me very happy. That player was engaging with my world. I was convincing them that the rain was real, that the world was real. But then he said, "Something bad must be about to happen." That threw me off. Especially because the player was completely right. Something bad was about to happen. And looking back on my usage of weather in D&D with that comment in mind, I realized that most of the times when I planned for something dark and creepy, I pulled out the rain. I was letting too much of the writer in me flood into my D&D game. You see, we authors use weather as a tool to reinforce certain emotions. We all know the trope. We all remember a movie scene where right after something really sad happens, it starts to rain. The rain in that scene is a character itself, showing up to enhance the feeling of sadness that the author wants to accentuate. And that's a great thing to use in RPGs. I cannot advise against it. But there are certain traps that we need to be mindful of. So right up front, I'm going to share with you my 4 basic principles on how to use weather in D&D and RPGs. Number 1, use it but don't abuse it. When it comes to influencing emotions, your players shouldn't guess what's about to happen based on the weather. Number 2, use it more. Flood your players' senses and immerse them in a realistic world. Number 3, make it relevant, especially when it comes to strategic impact in combat. And number 4, make it fun. I will go down into each of these with a bit more detail, but be sure to stick around because I will be sharing my very simple rules for making weather relevant in combat. Let's start with tip number 1, using weather but not abusing it as a mood catalyst. This is where my writer instincts failed me. I know that weather in storytelling is a symbol that can inflame or soothe certain feelings, but because I abused it, my players started to notice a pattern. This is not good. It will break immersion. Anytime your players can predict future events based on totally unrelated things, they are being reminded that they're playing a game, that this isn't real, that there's a programming or agenda hidden behind the screen. In real life, rain is just rain. You worry about getting wet or protecting your campfire, not with the vampire that is surely about to attack. This isn't to say that you should never use weather to punctuate certain story beats. It's not by accident that this is a tool in any storyteller's arsenal. It is very powerful. I mean, it's pretty awesome when you arrive at Castle Ravenloft for the first time. But if it happens when a massive storm is cracking lightning above you, or if there is such a heavy mist that you can barely see how massive the castle is, it sends a whole different message. Every type of weather can be strongly associated with at least one mood. For example, rain speaks sadness, while sunny days speak happiness. Thunderstorms are about shock and fury and release, while fog is mysterious and ominous. If instead of using weather to foreshadow future events, you use it to punctuate certain moods, not events but moods, you might find it easier to avoid falling into certain patterns. Moderation is still advised, but I found out that this little distinction helped me quite a bit. The solution to this problem also lies within tip number 2, making abnormal weather more frequent. I always try to engage with the player's senses as much as possible because it provides a more evocative experience, as those descriptions activate certain sensorial memories in the player's minds. And weather is a great example of this. It invokes many senses simultaneously. So, using non-neutral weather is always a good idea, but it also brings the added benefit of hiding the moments when you actively use weather as a mood influencer. After all, if you already used heavy fog 3 times in the last few sessions and nothing happened, your players will be less likely to suspect that this time an assassin is going to try to use the cover to murder one of the characters. And let's not forget that weather changes with the seasons. Showing different kinds of weather can also give your players a feeling of time passing, which all adds up to that immersion that we want so much. Before we go on, let me just say something about using weather to steer the players' moods. First, don't use it as a railroading mechanism. It's okay to try to make a certain mood fall upon the table. It really is no different than trying to startle your players with a surprise initiative, or ask for some contemplation after a player character death. We all did those. But don't put yourself in a position where you think that there is a right mood that the players must absolutely feel. All you can do is suggest and steer. It's up to your players to deduce the rest and to determine what they are feeling. And if they don't feel like what you imagined they would be feeling, that's okay. If you demand that your characters feel the appropriate mood, you might as well be ordering them, "Hey you, feel that way!"
Come on, people, hit the dance floor, have a good time. Why is no one having a good time? I specifically requested it.
The character's mood is the players to control. That's just D&D. On the other hand, remember that while there are certain stereotypical feelings associated with each type of weather, you don't need to be a slave to them. My Portuguese teacher, which is the equivalent class in Portugal to English or literature in other countries, she used to tell me that symbols are always ambivalent. For example, when you describe something in a poem as red, that color can invoke a feeling of passion, of love, or warmth. But it can also be used differently to mean blood and violence and death. Weather is no exception to this. We all have been exposed to the rain means sadness trope, but think about kids playing happily in the rain, without a care in the world if they get dirty or wet. Better yet, think about the opening of Friends, even though that was technically a fountain, it wasn't rain. Rain can also be a symbol of release, of happiness, of freedom. What about the sun? You can associate it with joy and happiness, but the scorching summer sun can also make you feel tired and slow and exhausted. Symbols are always ambivalent. Have fun with them. Anyway, tip number 3, make it relevant. Just like I shared in my last DM's Den video about how nations go to war, if you didn't see it, I'll leave a link up there or down below in the Underdark. When you present an information to your players to describe the world, it will be just a fact for them. We can strive for better. We want to trigger a reaction, an opinion, or a feeling from them. That way, they will establish an emotional connection with what we are describing, and our world will be much more real. Don't limit yourself to saying it's raining. Describe how the characters' pants are sticking to their legs, making them uncomfortable. And don't stop at, "It's a very hot day." Describe the feeling of droplets of sweat trickling down the character's skin. We want the weather to mean something to the players, physically, psychologically, or both. This is also important in battle. Wouldn't it seem strange to you if rolling to shoot an arrow in a quiet summer day and in the middle of a hurricane were the same? Having the weather affect the battle is not only more immersive, it's actually a cooler strategic challenge for your players. Some might even get excited to experience different kinds of weather in battle, to see what fun little quirk they would bring to the combat system. And it doesn't have to be extremely complicated to incorporate these effects in battle. I can share with you some very simple rules that I developed to make weather more meaningful that are surprisingly game-changing. In heavy rain, the downpour makes it difficult to aim ranged attacks, and both projectiles and magic have their trajectories altered by the water. So all ranged attack rolls, including spells, are made with disadvantage. Moreover, while I don't think that rain would necessarily make the ground difficult terrain, it does make it more slippery, so every creature has their walking speed reduced by 5 feet to avoid slipping. In harsh sunlight, the blazing sun makes you tired and slow. Combined with the effort of combat, this slowly pushes you closer and closer to passing out, which is represented by 1 point of fire damage suffered at the end of every creature's turn. This may not seem like a lot, but I can assure you that it will make your players stress at the ticking clock, especially the spellcasters, who now have an additional difficulty concentrating. Also, at your discretion, you could allow a character that dives in cold water or suffers cold damage to be immune to that fire damage for a round or two. For violent winds, I have a fun rule. First, every ranged weapon attack can only be made at the weapon's short range, and even so, at a disadvantage. But then, at initiative count 20, every creature must succeed on a strength saving throw. You define the difficulty depending on how strong the winds are, or be pushed 5 feet in the direction of the wind without provoking attacks of opportunity. Changing the battlefield like this is not only fun as hell, it's also a very different strategic puzzle. In a hurricane, you could even triple the distance or not allow ranged weapon attacks at all. For heavy snow, I would use the same rules as harsh rain. However, if instead of snow it was hail, then every creature in the battlefield also has to make constitution saving throws to keep concentration, kinda like the sleet storm spell. And for fog, every creature can see as many feet as their passive perception, divided by 5 to discover how many squares in the grid, and beyond that radius, the area is heavily obscured, and creatures suffer from the blindness condition. It's quite fun experimenting with these different battle conditions, but just so the players don't feel like you're changing the rules mid-game, consider being clear with them on how the weather is going to affect the battle they're living right now. Regardless, I can assure that these simple tweaks will enrich your players' gaming experience. And let us not forget the final tip: make it fun! Weather can be an opportunity for you to present interesting situations to players that they would never face otherwise. Why not take advantage of recent snows to have the PCs engage in a snowball fight? Or host a summer festival to watch the fireflies dance in the riverbank? Or a beach episode during the hot season? Maybe the local kids are jumping on puddles and splashing water on anyone crossing the street, providing a flavorful description, or maybe even serving as a pretext to introduce an NPC as the characters chase down those annoying brats who you know will become informants or trainees or even the official fan club of the party. I think the point here is just being creative, to take advantage of the role-playing opportunities and to remember that weather doesn't need to be all bad. By engaging with the environment, in this case the weather, instead of just describing it, you will make it feel more real to your players. In a way, this is show don't tell applied to D&D with a different twist. I could go on, but I think the main message is here, and most of this advice apply to a lot of different things, in both D&D and storytelling. The main mission is always the same: make our audience forget that they're experiencing a fake life and trick them into thinking it is real. Anything we can use to engage their senses, their curiosity, their emotions, their imagination, without ever reminding them that it's all smoke and mirrors behind the curtain, it's fair game. I hope these tips resonated with you or gave you some cool ideas, and if you have your own rules for making weather more interesting, please share them with us in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. If you liked it, there's a good chance that someone else will like it too. I'm the first Arcadian, the resident geek and compulsive dungeon master. For more D&D nonsense and lots of art, I invite you to my Twitter @TFirstArcadian and to my TikTok and Instagram @TheFirstArcadian. What would you like to hear me talk about next? Let me know down below. I hope to see you all in the next video.